was a man that was named George Bernard, who was struggling with some personal problems that were causing him a great deal of trouble. In his suffering, his mind returned again and again to the cross of Jesus Christ. This, he thought, was the heart of the gospel. The cross that he pictured was not an ornate cross. It was not a pretty cross. It was not a cross made of gold. It was not a cross made of silver. It was a rough, splintery, blood-stained cross. George Bernard was under the influence of one of our texts today from the Gospel of John. The very familiar verse, John 3:16. He said, "I saw the Christ of the cross, as if I were seeing John 3:16 leaving the printed page, seeing it take form and act out the meaning of redemption." Now, I think we all know John 3:16, so let's repeat it together right now. Let's see how well you can pass this test. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. And so Bernard sat down and he wrote a tune for the words, but the words he was struggling with. In fact, he could only come up with really one line. He struggled for weeks to set words to the melody that he had written. The theme of the cross grew increasingly more urgent to him over time. He struggled then, once again after a few weeks, with the words to his hymn, as he was trying to write it. This time, though, when he sat down to write it, the words came to him. He later told a friend, "I sat down and immediately was able to rewrite the stanzas of the song without so much as a word falling off of the page." He said, "I called in my wife. I took out my guitar and sang the completed song to her, and she was thrilled." On June 7th, 1913, George Bernard introduced a new hymn at a revival meeting that he was conducting. The words go like this, if you haven't already figured it out. "On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross, till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown." The old rugged cross became one of the most important hymns of the 20th century. What impressed me, however, was how he described his feelings as he struggled to bring his feelings to that music that I talked about. He said, "I saw the Christ of the cross as if you were seeing John 3:16, leaving the printed page. He saw it take form and act out the meaning of redemption." John 3:16 has had that effect, I believe, on many people. That is why, even though our lesson from the Gospels today is John 3, verses 1 through 17, I'm focusing on John 3:16. Martin Luther called John 3:16 the gospel in miniature. If all you had of the New Testament was this one verse, it would be enough to save your soul. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. We've heard this beautiful verse so often, I'm tempted to say that sadly we take it all too often for granted. But have you ever thought about what it would mean if we just changed a few of the key words in this sentence? Let's have some fun with that this morning. Let's change a verb in that phrase. What if it went like this? For God so rejected the world. That makes a big difference, doesn't it? It nearly happened in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, with the story of Noah. God nearly rejected the world, but instead, after the flood, he made a promise. and he placed a rainbow in the sky as a symbol of a covenant that he was making with humanity to never, ever flood the earth again. But that is how it maybe could have read. God so rejected the world. Or, think about this. Maybe we could change the first noun in this statement. Maybe it could read like this. For God so loved, let's just pull something out of a hat, Israel. That's what many Israelites believed at that time. They believed because they were God's chosen people that meant that God loved them more than the other people of the earth. The prophets had to remind them that they were chosen to be a light to the other people, and not that God loved them more. And of course, that verse could also read something like this. For God so loved America. Or it could read, for God so loved the nice people. But you know what? It doesn't read like that. It says, for God so loved the world. That's everybody. That's the rich, it's the poor, it's the beautiful, it's the ugly, it's the saint, it's the sinner. It's all of us. Listen again to this verse and consider what a world of difference it would make if even one word were changed in it. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Last weekend, we kicked off the season of Lent, and I focused on temptation. This week we're focusing on God's character. We're focusing on God's love for us. There's nothing in this entire universe that can compare to God's love. When we compare human love, if we were to go that route, what's human love? All too often it's selfishness, maybe some pettiness, maybe prejudice. So how do we really measure what real love is? It's John 3:16. Think about this. For God so loved the world. He loves each one of us. Imagine if God didn't love this world. There wouldn't be a world. That he gave his only Son. Now that is true love. Quite a few of us have raised children or have children. How many of us would be willing to sacrifice one of our kids for others in this world? It was God that sacrificed his Son on that cross. It is God's love for us that is shown through that sacrifice. You and I would have a lot of difficulty with that. A lot of difficulty. That whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Because of that love that God showed and the sacrifice that his Son made for each one of us, we have eternal life with God. The gospel in miniature. What a statement. It's a statement that we should all memorize and remember. Let me tell you a true story that acts out in our human life what that love that God gave us is all about. A man named Alfred Vanderbilt. He was the great-grandson of a billionaire. There was nothing particularly praiseworthy about Alfred as he lived out his life. He used his massive inheritance to invest in real estate and to play with the horses, let's just say. And he threw a lot of lavish parties. But here is why we remember Alfred. In 1915, he set sail on a British ocean liner, the Lusitania, headed toward London. At that time, Europe was embroiled in World War I. But nobody thought that no enemy troops would attack a civilian cruise ship. Sadly, they were wrong. A German U-boat attacked the Lusitania, and it sailed off the coast of Ireland. As a first-class passenger, Vanderbilt was guaranteed a life jacket and a seat on one of the first lifeboats leaving the ship. However, Vanderbilt refused all his rights. He gave away his life jacket and his seat on the lifeboat. As the ship slowly sank into the water, Alfred focused on getting as many children into the lifeboats as possible. He died saving others. A New York Times journalist described Vanderbilt's last moments as this. He said, "Gallantry which no words of mine can describe." That is what Jesus Christ did on the cross for us. That's the example for each one of us. He died so that we may all live. How do you describe a love that is unearned, undeserved, given freely and generously and sacrificially for the sake of everyone, whether they can ever return that love or not? That is truly God's love for us. God had a million reasons to condemn the world, but he didn't. God saved the world by giving the absolute greatest gift he could ever give. And God made us a promise that whoever believes, yes, whoever believes in God's Son, Jesus Christ, will not perish, but have eternal life. Let me ask you this question this morning. Have you accepted that promise in your own life? Have you accepted the free gift he has given you through his sacrifice on the cross? During this Lenten season, that is truly something to think about. I'd like to close my message out this morning. We started out talking about a song that I thought I had up here. Well, the song was The Old Rugged Cross, and it had all the words to it. How about we sing the first verse of that from memory? For whatever crazy reason, it's not in your hymnals.